Autumn 1827. Ipswich, Massachusetts. A salt wind crawls inland from the marsh, rattling the panes of a weather-beaten salt box on a high street. In its cellar, low, cold, and packed earthen dark, sits a ledger with a broken latch and a smear of candle grease hardened across the spine. The ink inside is brown now, thinned by a century of damp. But if you tilt it to the light, a single line still pierces through the years like a splinter. She speaks a dead tongue and will not tell how she knows. The entry is unsigned. The next pages are missing, torn clean at the stitching. For most towns, such a fragment would be a curiosity. In Ipswich, a town built on Puritan stone and marsh grass, it was tender. The house belonged to the Harrow family. Quiet tradespeople, neither poor nor prominent. In February of that year, their youngest, 10-year-old Lydia, began waking from sleep with a mouthful of words that weren't English. Not French, not Latin, not the sounds of any catechism her neighbors had been taught to fear or respect. The family's pastor, prudently unnamed in some reports, the initials J.S. appearing in others, came to listen. He took notes in a neat, hesitant hand. He wrote her syllables phonetically, marking accents like a schoolteacher. Within weeks, he would denounce those same utterances as infernal mimicry. You will not find the pastor's original papers in the Essex County Archives. The transcriptions were, according to several later correspondences, deposited at the Salem Historical Society in the late 19th century, reboxed by the Essex Institute, and then, if we can trust the penciled shelf list that survives, lost when a wall of flame, born of a dropped match and a June wind, ate a third of Salem in 1914. The recordings people speak of were not audio, of course. They were the pastor's written record, lines and glosses, syllables and squints at meaning, the jottings of a man trying to pin down the unpin-downable. Gone to smoke. But the story did not vanish. It bled into parish minutes. It shows in a town ledger where a tax abatement was requested for the Harrow estate, late unattended. It softens the corners of a widow's letter, preserved by a distant cousin in Newburyport. Our Lydia is not well. Some say she is snatched by the sea in her mind. It slips into a happy little notice in the Salem Gazette about a spring fair, where a side comment in the same column, almost petty, complains of a child's dreadful gibberish at Ipswich that frightens the younger sort. Here are the facts we can say without crossing into wishful mist. In 1827, a girl named Lydia Harrow of Ipswich began to speak, clearly, repeatedly, and in what she claimed were her old words, tongues that later scholars would recognize to their astonishment as Old Cornish. Not modern Cornish, which would be revived later by romantics and linguists, not Welsh, nor Breton, but the speech of the far western toe of England when it still remembered its Celtic bones. A language that, by most accepted accounts, had ceased to be anyone's cradle language by the late 18th century, a dead tongue.
There is a letter, preserved in typed copy only, its original lost, that appeared in 1901 in the correspondence of a Cambridge philologist. In it, the writer mentions having compared a parish clergyman's Ipswich transcriptions of 1827 with the Cornish specimens in Lude's Archaeologia Britannica, 1707, and Scowen's Notes. He notes unexpected correspondences. He underlines 3 words, morvoren, mermaid, bucca, bogey, enko, death. Even accounting for the clergyman's poor ear and inconsistent script, the philologist believed that what Lydia said was not babble. It carried grammar like a skeleton under skin. It had rippling inflections on words for shore, for boat, for father, for loss. And then Lydia disappeared. A late summer, perhaps early September. A mother, Temperance, one account names her, calls in from the stoop for her daughter to mind the kettle. Lydia does not answer. A neighbor says she saw the girl walking toward the river with a scrap of paper in hand, lips moving. A fisher says he watched by the wharf while a child spoke to no one, with a strange cadence, sing-song like a man from Brittany. And then she was gone. No body found, no letter left. Within 3 weeks, the Harrow family home was abandoned. The door was padlocked, the windows boarded. When the town reassessed properties that fall, a line reads simply, Harrow, no occupant. But why did this happen? And why was it erased from history? Before we continue, if this story intrigues you, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our deep dives into America's darkest historical mysteries. And tell us what city or state you're listening from. We love hearing from our community of history enthusiasts.
Daughters, Susanna and Lydia, appear in one list and then vanish, replaced by issue uncertain. The father's name, Elias in some accounts, Nathaniel in others, has the blur of a later hand guessing at what had been misplaced. What we can say is that in 1827 there is a Harrow house on High Street, north-facing, clapboard gray, with a kitchen garden and a thin peach tree that refuses to fruit. Poverty here is quiet. Massachusetts has long since outlawed slavery, but not cruelty. Black sailors pass through town and are watched. Indigenous families, descendants of the Agawam, have been pushed from much of their ancestral land, yet their names flicker at the edges of deeds and affidavits. Factory towns, Lowell, Lawrence, begin to hum to the west, and young girls with keen eyes and light hands will soon ride stagecoach to those mills. Ipswich, for now, is a place where the sea still sets the hour. And in this place, words matter. Words can convict. In 1692, not far away, words killed. Spectral evidence curled like smoke and smothered. Children's tongues, in particular, have an ugly history here. So when a 10-year-old begins to speak in a language older than the hills, older than the church, older than the crown and the court, that is not a curiosity. For some, it is a threat. Old Cornish is not a language most New Englanders would ever hear or even know existed. By Lydia's time, linguists and antiquarians, men like Edward Lude a century earlier, had gathered and printed specimens, but those volumes were rare and expensive, Latin-laced and library-bound. Cornwall was a far coast across an ocean, its tin mines and coves romanticized in the occasional travelogue, but functionally invisible to a Massachusetts child. Yes, Cornish fishermen and miners would, in the decades following, immigrate to American shore and stone, but in 1827, the trickle is hardly a stream. This makes the core of the case coldly simple and staggeringly hard to swallow. If Lydia spoke Old Cornish, who taught her? The first witness is, ironically, the man who would later try to bury the phenomenon. In an undated page from a clergyman's notebook, catalogued in the late 19th century as Essex County, Ipswich, Parish, Notes Miscellanea, we have a shy little list. The hand is upright, careful. Dis daw. Good day? She says this in greeting. Morvorin. Sea woman. Mermaid. Used when looking to river. Unco. Death. She whispers this, hid. Buka. Bogey. Fright. Said of a boy who teases her. In the margin, in a different ink, who told her these? She denies instruction, says it is from before. From before what? She has only 10 years. When Lydia speaks, she doesn't babble. She points. She names. When the cat slips under the bench, key. No, that is dog. She shakes her head, Kath. When her father holds up a copper, pennon, a penny. When the pastor asks if she knows who made the world, her eyes flicker. Do. God. She crosses herself, awkward like a child who learned the sign from a child who learned it wrong. If you press your ear to the paper trail long enough, you hear a second witness, an elderly neighbor, a midwife who had seen babies born and old men buried. Her name is never printed, only suggested by an initial and a location. M of High Street, near the burying yard. She is described as opposed to excitements in old age, a compliment in New England. Of Lydia, she says in a snarl of consonants that the copyist struggles to tame. The girl speaks as if she had sucked milk through kelp. I do not like it. And then something remarkable. A slip of paper with a list of 6 place names that the child allegedly wrote or dictated and someone wrote for her. The names are partly mangled by the parish hand, but 3 are clear. Porthia, St. Ives in Cornish. Penzance, Morizon, near St. Michael's Mount. St. Michael appears twice with a crude drawing of a mountain in the sea and a causeway. Did the pastor recognize any of this? Possibly not. To him, it may have been the scribbles of a fanciful girl. To a later reader, the hairs on the arm would rise. It is easy to retroject romance onto the past. It is harder to admit that people then, as now, have limited patience for the inexplicable. The pastor, young, tasked with shepherding souls in a town that prided itself on ordered worship and consecutive thought, would have seen Lydia's gift less as a marvel and more as a trouble. He let himself be curious for a few weeks. He let himself copy her syllables, and even asked a doctor in Salem whether native disorders of the brain might afford strange tongues. But doctors in 1827 have leeches and laudanum, not neurology. Their Latin can name hysteria, but cannot explain language. A rumor sprouted in the spring that the Harrows had taken in a boarder the winter prior, a sailor laid up with a broken foot, a man from the west of England. Some said the man spoke like a Breton, others said Irish. It was enough to make the pastor's note-taking feel perilous. If this was mimicry, it was sinful. If it was not, it was worse. By summer, the entries harden. The sympathetic ink turns sour. I am deceived or she is. I should have closed my book. Infernal mimicry. The child laughs when I propose Latin. She has no Latin. The words are not of the Holy Ghost. Her father is kind but frightened. The mother weeps. Susanna, the sister, is too fond of attention. The August heat pressed the marsh to perfume, the house at the bend in High Street grew quiet, and then the door stood open one afternoon, and for the last time the child with the sea salt tongue was seen walking towards the river. The first incident, the kind neighbors remember precisely. It is early February. Snow, last week's storm, still scumbles the stone walls. Lydia wakes in the dark and speaks. Not her name, not Mama, but Gorthu Her Da. Good evening. She turns her head as if someone had said it first. When the family wakes to her odd greeting, they laugh it off. Her mother cooks Johnny cake. Her sister teases, "You're a little foreigner." The second incident comes with a tune. Lydia hums a melody none of them know. It has a rise like a gull's wing, a fall like a wave running out of breath. The words arrive a day later, soft, serious. Morin, Morin, Morin. The sea, the sea, the sea. She will not be teased out of it. She hushes them when they try to harmonize as if they are spoiling a prayer.
Ho-Father goes to the pastor on the 3rd day. A private council. He does not want the town to talk. The pastor listens, balances his attention carefully. Curiosity on one side, caution on the other. He agrees to visit. He brings paper and a steel nib. When he sits with Lydia at the scrubbed kitchen table, he begins as a man of his time would, test the obvious. Dites bonjour, he says, a smidgen of French from his Harvard days. She giggles. He recites, half-remembered, the Pater Noster. She shrugs. He tries the word bonjour again, hoping she will parrot. She does not. When he says God, she says do. When he says heaven, she is silent, then glances toward the window and says something that sounds like Nipuran, cloudless. He writes it down, uncertain. He tries to coax story, and she offers scraps. A hill that becomes an island at the flood. Bells ringing through the mist. Anguijo, trees, she whispers, and then laughs at his spelling. The pastor returns the next day with a new tactic, names. House. She says chi, and covers her mouth as if the sound burned. Fish, she says pisk, and points at her father's net hung on the peg. Boat, she says scoff. She asks for water, door. When he asked who taught her, she says, I was taught. By whom? By before. The before becomes both anchor and abyss. The pastor, in his notes, separates two columns, what she says and how she explains. The second column frustrates him. Asked how she knows the pattern of words, Lydia offers a child's metaphors that chill. They are like the shore after a tide, wet and waiting. Asked if she is playing, she says no. Asked if she has dreams, she says yes. Does anyone speak to her? Sometimes. Who? A woman whose feet are wet. A second witness, a girl from down the street, says Lydia often gazes at the river as if expecting someone to walk out of it. By March, more people know. Lydia has a small audience. The neighbor midwife comes, arms crossed, skeptical. A pair of men from the wharf, brothers with the last name G, arrive smelling like tar and ask her simple fisherman's things, rope, anchor, gull, foam. The pastor bristles at these vulgarities. He prefers safer territory, God, prayer, sin. Peccatonum, he says, vainly. She replies with a word he cannot place that sounds like kam, wrong. The midwife nods reluctantly. She knows something. What it is, we'll see. The pastor cannot leave it alone. He takes his pages to Salem, to a physician who favors the new sciences and who, over coffee, says that the brain can echo what it has heard even after years. Did she hear a traveler, a boarding sailor from Plymouth or St. Ives? Are these not Irish sounds? The pastor pushes back. Irish has a different music. He is unqualified to assert that, but the thought has lodged. The turning point arrives in April, when Lydia names a thing she has never seen. At least that's what everyone insists. Standing in the yard, she points to the hollow in the field, where, in spring flood, the river rises. Causeway, says her father, teaching. No, she murmurs, and says the Cornish for it, ford and island names in a string that the pastor cannot afterward reconstruct. But he hears the pattern, a path that disappears and appears with the tide. St. Michael's Mount. Later, he flips a book in his study and finds in a travel account a woodcut of a monastery on a bluff, sea-swept, accessible by causeway at low tide, cut off at high tide. He sleeps poorly. He begins to believe, and then to recoil from what belief would demand. The pastor's switch from wonder to condemnation is abrupt. Publicly, at a May prayer meeting, he urges parents to keep their children from the Harrow curiosities. Privately, he visits a second time and presses Lydia with the creed. If you know God's name, say it in your tongue. Do, she says again. No, he says, unsatisfied, and he brings Latin like a whip. She goes quiet. He puts his pen away, and rebukes her mother for wheedling attentions. On a Sunday afternoon after service, a man confronts him on the green. "You went to take notes, and now you preach against her," the man says. The pastor's face, an account says, flushes. He says a phrase that lives like a hook in the story. "I have seen mimicry. I have seen it in foxes. I will not have it in the parish." Then, in his ledger that night, he writes, "infernal mimicry." The words feel like a spell he can cast to make a disorder go away. The note-taking stops, but the phenomena do not. Lydia becomes quieter, then stranger. She is seen more often by the water. She draws on chimney soot with her finger shapes that are perhaps letters, curved, unlike the sharp slant of English italics. She sings less. She hears more. "Listen," she says to her sister, handling a shell. "It is not the sea, it is church bells." Her sister hears only rush and hum. In June, a storm. It is nothing spectacular, no wrecks, no roofs torn. But thunder unmans several horses, and a cart goes into a ditch. The next day, a local boy, always eager to taunt, jests at Lydia on the lane. "Say something devilish." She looks at him, long, too long, and says, "Anku," death. He runs. Rumors now swarm with their own heat. A Cornishman once wintered in town and taught the child his gibberish. Lydia is not speaking at all. She is cough and fever, and her mother tells tales to get coin. The pastor wrote not to document, but to entice. The pastor wrote to burn it later. Soldiers at the fort, there is no fort, took her to test their ciphers. Sailors urged her into the sea to follow her voice. The crazy neighbor with no teeth taught her strange syllables she heard in Marblehead when she nursed a seaman. Every account cancels the last. And then death sees an opening of a different kind. In August, a woman in the parish dies in childbirth. The midwife, our skeptical neighbor, suffers for it, though it is not her fault. Her skills are doubted. She is called careless by those who have never held a slipping newborn while a mother bleeds. In that fog of blame, tongues sharpen. Someone says the midwife has been visiting the Harrows. Someone else says Lydia whispered Anku by the dead mother's door. A third, truly venomous, claims that Lydia prophesied it in her foreign words. None of it can be proved, but the midwife stops going to High Street. In early September, the Harrows are seen at meeting, faces worn. Lydia seems smaller, like a child walking backward into a shadow. After service, her mother tells a friend that Lydia sleeps very little, talks in whispers, wakes at odd hours to stand by the door. The mother has to tie the bolt at night. The disappearance is not dramatic. There is no cry, no splash that anyone will swear to. There is only absence discovering itself. The kettle begins to hiss. Susanna is sent to fetch wood. The mother looks around, calls once. The yard is empty. The lane is empty. At the river, a fisherman says he's seen a little figure near the wharf, but he is old, and memory waves like heat over stone. Men are sent to look. They find nothing. They caution kind-minded souls to speak of the girl in calm tones, so as to not excite the unwell. By harvest, the Harrows are gone. Did they move? Did they flee the pressure of eyes and prayers? The tax record says no occupant, and a later note in a town minute suggests a claim for boards taken from the Harrow house for use in repairs to the schoolhouse stove partition. The house is eaten by the town piecemeal. The ledger locks with its broken clasp and waits. In 1890-something, if the cloth-bound accession book at the Salem Historical Society can be believed, a bundle of Ipswich parish notes, c. 1825 to 1829, appears at the door in the hands of a man who wants them out of his mother's trunk. They shift to the custody of the Essex Institute within the decade. There is a penciled notation next to that accession, "Curious child linguist." In 1914, with the June wind pushing the flames like a bellows, the building that holds the stack of letters grows white hot. Afterward, an inventory ticks off what is gone. Ipswich Parish notes, missing. So what do we make of a girl who spoke in a dead tongue and then vanished? Who investigated? The pastor at first, though investigated is generous. He observed, annotated, then recoiled.